It was one of those afternoons that carried no sign of trouble. The sky was wide and bright, with a lazy breeze moving through the trees that lined the quiet streets. The school day had ended an hour ago, and the sound of kids laughing and talking had already faded away. He walked home the same way he always did, taking the long route through the park because it was peaceful there. His backpack was heavy with books, his basketball tucked under his arm, and his headphones played soft music that made the world feel calm. He was 16, tall for his age, and had the kind of gentle expression that made most people feel at ease around him. His mother often said he had an old soul. He didn't talk much, but when he did, he spoke carefully as if his words mattered. That afternoon, his thoughts were simple: how tired his legs felt from practice, what leftovers might be in the fridge, and how good a cold shower would feel. The sound of tires crunching on the road caught his attention. A police car rolled slowly past him, then came to a stop a few feet ahead. He thought little of it at first. Cars often slowed near the crosswalk, but then a second patrol car pulled up from behind, blocking part of the lane. His stomach tightened. The music in his headphones suddenly felt too loud, so he paused it. The street had gone strangely quiet. 2 officers stepped out. One was tall and broad, his expression serious. The other was younger, his hand resting on his belt. They exchanged a quick look before the older one spoke. "Hey there, kid. Mind stopping a sec?" He froze for a moment, then nodded politely. "Sure. Where are you coming from?" "Basketball practice," he answered, his voice calm but cautious. "You live around here?" "Yes, sir." "A few blocks that way," he said, pointing down the street. The officer nodded but didn't smile. The younger one circled a bit closer. "Got some ID on you?" "Yes, sir." He unzipped his backpack slowly, pulling out his student ID and showing it to them. The older officer looked at the card, then at him. "You match the description of someone we're looking for. Just making sure you're not who we think you are." The words made his heart pound faster. "What kind of description?" he asked carefully. The officer avoided the question. "Just stay right there, all right?" A woman walking her dog slowed down across the street, watching the scene. Another person took out a phone. He could feel their eyes on him. His palms began to sweat. He remembered what his mother always said about staying calm and respectful. Never argue, never make sudden moves. Keep your hands visible. "I didn't do anything," he said quietly. "We didn't say you did." The younger officer replied, but his tone was sharp. Just following up, the boy's heart raced. His mind was full of questions he didn't dare ask. Why did they stop him? What did they think he'd done? His basketball rolled slightly on the pavement, bumping his shoe. One of the officers glanced at it suspiciously, as if even that small motion mattered. "Put your hands on the hood for me," the older one said. He hesitated. "Sir, I didn't—" "Now," the man ordered. He swallowed hard and did as he was told. The metal was warm from the sun. He could hear his own heartbeat. The younger officer started patting down his jacket and pockets, moving quickly and roughly. When he felt the phone in his pocket, he pulled it out. "You been talking to anyone today?" "My mom," he said softly. "She called to check if I was done with practice." The officer frowned and placed the phone on top of the car. His throat felt dry. He wanted to ask to call her, but fear kept him quiet. The crowd nearby was growing. A few more people had stopped to watch. Someone muttered, "He's just a kid," but no one stepped closer. The older officer spoke into his radio. "Yeah, we've got someone matching it. Tall male, dark jacket, backpack, heading east." "Stand by?" The boy felt a wave of disbelief. "Matching what?" he thought. "I just came from school." He looked down the street toward home, thinking of his mother. She was probably starting dinner by now, or maybe still at work. She always said she trusted him to be careful. She always said she wanted him home safe. He stood still, trying to breathe slowly. Every minute felt longer than the last. The sun had started to drop lower, painting the street with a golden hue. He could see the reflection of the officers' faces in the car's windshield. Focused, cautious, unsure. Then his phone started to buzz on the hood of the car. One officer picked it up, glanced at the screen, and saw the word "Mom" flashing. "She's calling," the boy said softly. The officer hesitated, then pressed the power button to silence it. "We'll handle this first," he muttered. That small act hit harder than he expected. It wasn't just that they'd taken his phone. It was that they'd cut him off from the one person who could make him feel safe. He clenched his jaw, forcing himself not to cry. Another patrol car pulled up. The officers exchanged words with the newcomers, and suddenly, there were 4 of them around him. He could feel the weight of all their eyes on his back. One of them asked what he was doing in the area. Another questioned why his shoes looked dusty. It felt like every simple detail about him was being treated as proof of something he hadn't done. "Can I please call my mom?" he asked finally. His voice trembled just a little. "Not right now," the tall officer said. "Just relax." He nodded weakly, though every part of him felt tense. Minutes passed. A breeze rustled the trees and a siren wailed faintly somewhere far off. The smell of gasoline and warm asphalt filled the air. The boy stared at a small crack in the pavement beneath his shoes, focusing on it so he wouldn't think about how scared he was. He thought about his mother again. She was strong, calm, and always in control. He remembered how her voice sounded when she talked about her job. Measured, confident, protective. She once told him, "People respect the badge, but you have to earn it with your actions." He wondered what she'd say if she saw this. The crowd had grown to almost a dozen people now. Some whispered. One woman called out, "He's just a student." The officers ignored her. The boy's breathing grew shallow. His mind raced through what could happen next. Would they take him to the station? Would his mother find out from a phone call instead of his voice? The older officer got another message on his radio. "Still checking the footage," someone said through the static. "Hold him there for now." He didn't even know what footage they were talking about. He just knew he wanted to go home. He glanced up at the street sign at the corner. It was one his mother drove past every day. She was probably only 10 minutes away. He wished she would somehow appear right then, the way she always did when he was in trouble as a kid. But this was different. This wasn't a scraped knee or a bad grade. This was something he couldn't fix with words. His eyes started to sting. He blinked them clear. The younger officer shifted, as if feeling awkward now that the situation was dragging on. "Hey," he said quietly. "Just stay cool, all right? We'll be done soon." The boy nodded, but didn't answer. One of the bystanders started recording again, pointing their phone toward the police cars. The tall officer turned and barked, "Back up! Don't interfere!" The person stepped back but kept filming. The boy could feel the tension thickening in the air, everyone waiting for something else to happen. Then, faintly in the distance, the sound of another engine. A dark SUV turned the corner and slowed. It wasn't a police car. It stopped a few feet away and a woman stepped out. He didn't see her face yet, but something about her stride made his heart lift slightly. It was familiar, confident, steady, unafraid. She started walking quickly toward the group, one hand reaching into her jacket pocket. The officers noticed her. One raised a hand. "Ma'am, please stay back," he said firmly. She didn't stop. "That young man is my son," she said, her voice calm but sharp enough to cut through the noise. The boy turned his head slightly, eyes widening. The tall officer frowned. "Ma'am, we're conducting an investigation," she interrupted him, flipping open a badge that caught the sunlight. "Federal Bureau of Investigation," she said clearly. "Now tell me what exactly you think you're doing with my child." The air around them seemed to freeze. The boy's knees felt weak, but relief flooded his chest so suddenly it almost hurt. The crowd went silent. One of the officers stammered something, but the woman's steady gaze stopped him cold. For the first time that afternoon, the boy let out a shaky breath. He didn't move, didn't speak, but the fear that had gripped him for the past 20 minutes began to loosen. He knew his mother was here. And that changed everything. The street went silent after the woman's voice cut through the air. The officers froze, uncertain what to say next. The boy still stood near the police car, his hands trembling slightly, his heart pounding in his chest. He could see the sharp look in his mother's eyes as she stepped closer, her badge gleaming in the light. She stopped just a few feet away, facing the officers who had been questioning her son. Her voice stayed calm, but there was power in it, the kind of tone that made people listen whether they wanted to or not. "I'm going to ask you again," she said firmly, her gaze locked on the taller officer. "Why are you holding my son?" The man's posture stiffened. "Ma'am, we were following protocol. He matches the description of a suspect in an earlier what?" she interrupted. "Be specific." The younger officer looked uncomfortable. The tall one hesitated, then said, "A robbery at the corner store about 30 minutes ago. The suspect was described as a young male, dark jacket, athletic build." Her jaw tightened. That's it? That's your description? Half the kids walking home from school right now fit that. Did he resist? Threaten you? Do anything suspicious? Neither officer answered right away. One of them shifted his feet. The crowd behind them grew quieter, leaning in to hear. The woman's voice softened slightly, but the edge remained. You know, she said, I've worked in law enforcement for over 15 years. I train agents on how to approach suspects, how to assess risk, how to de-escalate situations. And what I see right now is a child being treated like a criminal for walking home. The older officer tried to regain control. We didn't mean any harm, ma'am. We're just doing our job. Doing your job means protecting people, she replied. All people. Her son watched quietly, standing a few feet behind the officers. His shoulders were tense, and he still hadn't moved his hands from the car. His mother turned to him and said softly, It's okay, sweetheart. You can relax now. He let his arms drop, the relief so strong it almost made him dizzy. She walked to his side, her eyes scanning him carefully, checking for any sign that he'd been hurt. She touched his shoulder lightly as if to reassure both of them that this was real. The officers exchanged uncertain looks. The one with the radio stepped aside, muttering something into his microphone. The woman noticed. Who are you calling? Just checking in with dispatch, he replied quickly. She folded her arms. Then please tell them to confirm that my son was at school during that so-called robbery. There should be cameras, attendance logs, teammates who saw him at practice. He's not your suspect. The younger officer nodded slightly. We can do that, ma'am. By now, more neighbors had come out from their houses. A few of them recognized the boy and began whispering among themselves. The situation had drawn attention, and cell phones were still recording. The woman turned toward the bystanders and said calmly, Thank you all for being witnesses. Please stay until this is resolved. The tall officer's face flushed. That won't be necessary, ma'am. Yes, it will, she said without raising her voice. The boy's heart swelled with pride and awe. He'd always known his mother was strong, but seeing her like this and standing tall, calm, and completely in control was something else entirely. The fear that had gripped him minutes ago was slowly replaced by a deep sense of safety. One of the officers returned after speaking with dispatch. Looks like the store footage shows someone wearing a hoodie. Your son's not wearing one. We might have been mistaken. Might have, she repeated. You were. The officer looked down. We apologize, ma'am. She nodded slowly, not letting her expression soften. Apologizing is a start, but I'd like to know what gave you the confidence to detain a minor on such a flimsy match. Did you even ask for ID before escalating? Yes, the younger one said quickly. He showed it to us. Then why was he searched and held like this? She asked, pointing at the police car. No one answered. The silence stretched. The woman let out a quiet sigh, then turned back to her son. Get your things, honey. He picked up his backpack and phone from the hood. His hand still shook slightly as he zipped up his bag. The officers stood awkwardly nearby, unsure of what to do next. One of them finally said, Ma'am, again, we're sorry. There was no harm intended. She looked directly at him. Intent doesn't erase impact. You need to remember that. With that, she took her son's hand gently and began walking back toward her car. The crowd parted, some people murmuring soft words of support. A woman called out, Good for you, and another added, They had no right. The boy glanced back once. The officers were still standing there, watching them leave. He didn't say anything until they reached the car. When they got inside, the silence between them was heavy. She started the engine but didn't drive right away. Instead, she turned to him. Are you okay? He nodded slowly. I think so. You sure? He swallowed hard. Yeah, just scared. She reached over and held his hand, squeezing gently. I know. For a while, neither of them spoke. The hum of the car's engine was the only sound. Then she said quietly, You did everything right. You stayed calm. You were respectful. That's all I could ever ask. He looked down at his shoes. I didn't know what else to do. I just kept thinking about what you always tell me. Stay still, keep your hands visible, don't argue. That's exactly why you're safe right now, she said. But it shouldn't have to be that way. You shouldn't have to think about survival when you're just walking home. Her words hung heavy in the air. She took a deep breath, trying to keep her voice steady. This isn't the first time I've seen something like this, but it's the first time it's happened to my child. And that changes everything. The boy glanced at her. Are you going to tell someone at work? Oh, I'm not just telling, she said firmly. I'm filing a report. There will be an investigation. If they're doing this to you, they're doing it to other kids too. He nodded, though part of him wished they could just forget it. Go home, eat dinner, and pretend it never happened. But he knew his mother. She wasn't someone who let things go when they were wrong. As they drove, he looked out the window. The same streets that had always felt normal now looked different. The houses, the trees, even the park, they all carried a faint shadow of what had just happened. His mother noticed his silence. "Talk to me," she said gently. He took a moment before speaking. They looked at me like I was guilty before I even said anything. Like just being me was enough. She tightened her grip on the steering wheel. "I know, and that's the part that hurts the most. You did nothing wrong. You were polite, respectful, and still they treated you like a threat. That's not about you. That's about them, their fear, their bias." He nodded again, his throat tight. "When you showed up, everything changed. They were so confident before, but when they saw your badge, they realized they couldn't hide behind excuses anymore," she said. "Authority only respects authority sometimes, and that's what needs to change." They stopped at a red light. The glow of the traffic signal reflected in her eyes. For a moment, she looked tired, the kind of tired that went deeper than sleep. "I became an agent because I wanted to make a difference," she said softly. "But days like this remind me how far we still have to go." He looked at her, seeing both her strength and her sadness. "You made a difference today," he said. "For me." Her eyes softened. "Maybe, but I wish I didn't have to." They drove the rest of the way home quietly. When they finally pulled into the driveway, the sun was almost gone, and the streetlights had begun to flicker on. She parked, turned off the car, and sat there for a moment. "Before we go inside," she said, "I want you to remember something. You are not defined by how people see you. You are defined by how you carry yourself, and today you carried yourself with strength and grace." He nodded, his chest tightening again, but this time it wasn't fear. It was something close to pride. They went inside, the familiar smell of home wrapping around them like a blanket. The boy dropped his backpack near the door and sat quietly at the kitchen table. His mother poured 2 glasses of water and sat across from him. For the first time that day, they both let out a long breath. The house was quiet. Outside, cars passed, distant and harmless. Inside, there was safety again, fragile but real. Neither of them knew that the video from the scene would soon spread across social media, shared by the bystanders who had filmed it. They didn't yet realize that what happened on that quiet street would reach far beyond their neighborhood. But for now, none of that mattered. What mattered was that he was home, safe, and sitting beside the one person who would always protect him. And she, quietly watching him sip his water with shaking hands, made a silent promise this would not happen again. Not to her son. Not if she could help it. The next morning felt heavier than usual. The sun rose, but it didn't feel like a new day. It felt like a day that had carried the weight of what came before it. The boy sat at the kitchen table, slowly stirring his cereal, though he wasn't really hungry. His mother stood near the counter, dressed neatly as always, but her eyes had a distant, serious look. She was already in work mode, calm, focused, but with something deeper running beneath the surface. Neither of them had said much since waking up. There was a quiet between them that wasn't uncomfortable but full of unspoken thoughts. Finally, she broke it. "I barely slept," she said softly. He looked up from his bowl. "Me neither," she nodded, her expression thoughtful. "I kept replaying everything in my mind. The way they stopped you, the way they talked to you, the look on your face when I got there." She paused, then added, "That's not something a mother should ever have to see." He didn't know what to say. He wanted to make her feel better, but he knew no words could erase that image from her mind, or from his own. "What are you going to do?" he asked after a while. Her eyes met his. "I already started. I called the department last night and left a message for the chief. I'll be meeting him today." He looked surprised. "You're really going to report them?" "I have to," she said. "Not just for you, for anyone else who might go through the same thing. If I stay silent, it keeps happening." He nodded slowly, admiring her strength even as he felt nervous about what might follow. "Will they get in trouble?" he asked. "They'll be investigated," she replied. "I don't know what will come of it, but at least it'll be on record. That's how change starts. One file, one report at a time." He sat quietly, watching her gather her papers and car keys. She seemed different today, more focused, almost colder. But he knew it wasn't anger driving her. It was purpose. When she left for work, the house felt strangely empty. The boy wandered into the living room and turned on the TV. The local news was running, nothing special at first. Then a headline appeared across the screen. Local teen wrongly detained by police. A mother reveals she's an FBI agent. His stomach dropped. The video from the night before was playing, recorded by one of the bystanders. He saw himself standing against the patrol car, his face scared and still. Then he saw the moment his mother stepped forward, flashing her badge. The clip cut off right there, but it was enough to make his chest tighten. The reporter spoke about the incident that raised questions about bias and procedure. They didn't mention names, but they didn't have to. Everyone in the neighborhood would know who it was. He muted the TV and sat there staring at the screen. His phone started buzzing a few minutes later. Messages from classmates, teammates, even people he barely talked to. Some were supportive, proud of your mom, or can't believe that happened to you. Others were curious. Was it really you? What did they say? He didn't know how to reply. Every word felt too small for what had happened. At the FBI office downtown, his mother walked through the metal detectors with a quiet determination. She'd been through those doors 1,000 times before, but today felt different. Today she wasn't just an agent. She was a mother demanding accountability. Her colleague, a friend from the same division, met her near the elevators. "I saw the video," he said softly. "I'm so sorry," she gave a small nod. "Thank you. I didn't plan for any of this to go public. Are you okay?" he asked. "I'm fine," she replied, though her voice carried the kind of calm that hides exhaustion. "I just need to handle it properly." She met with the local police chief in his office later that morning. He was polite, but she could see the nervousness in his eyes. The incident had already spread online. There were reporters calling the department, and the city's public relations team was preparing a statement. "I want to make something clear," she began. "I'm not here to embarrass your officers. I'm here to make sure this doesn't happen again. My son could have been hurt. The only reason it ended peacefully is because I arrived before things got worse." The chief nodded. "I understand, Agent. We've already started an internal review. The officers involved have been placed on administrative duty until we finish our investigation." "That's a start," she said. "But this isn't just about them. It's about training, culture, the way assumptions are made. I've worked with enough local departments to know how these patterns form." He sighed. "I know we have work to do, but you have to understand tensions are high these days. Officers are under pressure." She leaned forward slightly. "We're all under pressure. But pressure doesn't justify profiling. If your officers can't tell the difference between a student walking home and a suspect, that's not stress. That's bias." Her tone wasn't angry, but it carried weight. The chief nodded again, slower this time. "You're right. I'll make sure this is handled properly." When she left the building, she stood outside for a long moment, breathing in the cool air. She had faced hardened criminals, dangerous missions, and high-stakes cases. But nothing had ever made her heart race the way seeing her son against that patrol car had. Back at home, the boy had turned off his phone and gone outside to shoot hoops in the driveway. The rhythm of the basketball hitting the concrete helped clear his mind. It was something steady, something he could control. When his mother pulled into the driveway later, he stopped playing and looked up. She smiled faintly at him, though her eyes still carried that same quiet storm. "How did it go?" he asked. "It went as expected," she said. "They're reviewing everything. It might take some time, but it's moving forward." He nodded. "Everyone at school's been texting me. The video's everywhere." "I figured," she said. "I saw it too." He looked embarrassed. "It's weird seeing myself on the news. I didn't even do anything." "You did," she said softly. "You stayed calm when it mattered most." "That's not nothing." They went inside. She made tea for herself and a sandwich for him. The evening light came through the windows, painting the walls in gold. For the first time since yesterday, the house felt peaceful again. Then the doorbell rang. She walked to the door cautiously and opened it to find 2 police officers standing there, not the same ones from before. These looked younger, nervous, and unsure. "Ma'am," one of them said, "we just wanted to deliver this in person." He handed her a folded letter with the police department's letterhead. She thanked them and closed the door. Her son watched as she opened it. It was a formal apology from the department, polite, neatly written, and signed by the chief himself. She read it silently, then set it on the table. "They're trying," she said finally. "That's something. Are you still angry?" he asked. She thought for a long moment before answering. "Not angry," she said. "Just disappointed. Because I know they can do better." He nodded, understanding more than she realized. "You're going to make sure they do, right?" She smiled faintly. "You know me too well." That night, as he got ready for bed, he scrolled through social media again. The video had been shared thousands of times. Some comments were supportive, others were harsh, but one thing was clear. People were talking. People were asking questions. He realized then that maybe something good could come from what happened. Maybe it wasn't just about fear or anger, but about awareness, about starting conversations that could make others safer. His mother came into his room before he fell asleep. She sat on the edge of the bed and said, "I know it's been a lot, but I want you to remember one thing. You're not powerless. What happened to you isn't just a story now. It's a lesson for others, and sometimes that's how change begins." He looked up at her, his voice quiet. "Do you really think it'll change anything?" She smiled, brushing his hair gently. "Maybe not all at once, but step by step, yes. People notice when truth comes to light, even when it hurts." He nodded, finally feeling a bit of the weight lift from his chest. As the night settled in, the house grew still. The soft hum of the fridge, the ticking clock, and the sound of her footsteps down the hall made everything feel normal again. But deep down, both of them knew that normal had changed. They had seen something up close, something real and raw, and it had shifted how they looked at the world. The boy closed his eyes, thinking about the street where it all happened, about the flashing lights and his mother's calm voice. For the first time, he didn't feel small remembering it. He felt strong. And in the next room, his mother sat quietly at her desk, writing her official report, word by word, with the same steady hand she used at work. But this time, it wasn't just a case file. It was personal. The mother drove faster than she usually would, her hands tight around the steering wheel. Her phone sat on the dashboard, showing her son's location through the tracking app. The small blinking dot hadn't moved for several minutes, and her instincts told her something was wrong. She tried calling again, but there was still no answer. A cold feeling spread through her chest. It was supposed to be just another weekday. Her son had basketball practice and usually came home around 6. She'd planned to finish her report for work and then pick up dinner on the way. But now she couldn't think about anything except that blinking dot on her screen. As she turned onto a quiet street lined with trees, she saw the reflection of blue and red lights up ahead. Her heart sank. 2 patrol cars were parked across the road, lights flashing, and a small group of people had gathered nearby. She couldn't see his face yet, but something told her he was there. She parked at the corner, stepped out of her car, and started walking fast. Her heels clicked sharply against the pavement. The closer she got, the clearer the scene became. 2 officers, her son standing with his hands on the hood of a car, fear written across his face. "Ma'am, please stay back," one of the officers said, holding up a hand when he noticed her. She didn't slow down. Her voice stayed calm, but there was power behind it. "That's my son," the officer frowned. "We're in the middle of an investigation. Please stand back for your own safety." She stopped just a few steps away, meeting his eyes steadily. Then, with practiced precision, she reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out her badge. "FBI," she said, her voice firm. "Now explain to me what's happening here." Everything went quiet. The crowd, which had been murmuring softly, hushed. The younger officer froze. The older one straightened up quickly, his tone changing. "Ma'am, Agent, we were just responding to a call," he said awkwardly. "There was a report of a robbery suspect in the area, and your son matched the description." She glanced at her son, then back at the officers. "Matched the description? What description would that be?" The officer hesitated. "Young male, dark hoodie, backpack," she interrupted sharply. "That's half the teenagers in this neighborhood." Her words were steady, but her voice carried the kind of authority that came from years of experience. "Did you have any specific identifiers? Face, height, anything?" The officer looked uncomfortable. "We were just doing our job, ma'am." Her eyes didn't waver. "Your job is to protect the community, not harass minors who are walking home from school." She took a slow breath. "Did he resist? Did he threaten you in any way?" The younger officer quickly shook his head. "No, ma'am, he cooperated. Then why, she said quietly, is my son standing with his hands on your car like a criminal? No one spoke. The wind rustled the trees above them, and the sound of a distant siren echoed faintly through the evening air. The mother stepped closer to her son and gently placed a hand on his shoulder. He looked up at her, eyes wide with a mixture of relief and disbelief. "It's okay," she whispered softly, her tone shifting to warmth. "I'm here now." She turned back to the officers. "You can let him go. I'll take it from here." The older officer looked unsure but nodded. "Yes, ma'am." He motioned for the boy to lower his hands. Her son did so slowly, his hands trembling slightly. As he turned, she noticed red marks on his wrists where the officers had held him too tightly. That sight hit her harder than anything else. She took another deep breath, steadying herself. "I want your badge numbers," she said firmly. "Both of you." The officers quickly exchanged a nervous glance. They knew they had gone too far. They gave her their badge numbers without protest. Meanwhile, a few people in the crowd began whispering. Someone said softly, "She's with the FBI." Another person muttered, "That explains why they froze." Phones were still recording quietly from the sidelines. The mother kept her focus on the officers. "I'll be filing an official report," she said evenly. "You'll both be contacted by Internal Affairs and the Bureau. You know the protocol." The older officer started to apologize. "We're sorry, Agent, we really didn't know." Her tone sharpened. "You didn't need to know who I was to do your job correctly. You needed to know your duty." That sentence hung in the air like a weight. Neither officer could respond. She turned back to her son again. His eyes glistened and he tried to smile. "Can we go home now?" he asked quietly. She nodded. "Yes, we're going home." She led him away from the patrol cars, her hand still resting protectively on his shoulder. The crowd slowly began to disperse, though a few people stayed behind, still recording as the officers awkwardly tried to end the scene. When they reached her car, she opened the door for him. "Sit," she said softly. He slid into the passenger seat without a word. She took one last look back at the flashing lights before getting into the driver's side. For a moment, she sat there, hands resting on the wheel, staring ahead in silence. The adrenaline that had carried her through the confrontation began to fade, leaving behind a deep, heavy sadness. Her son looked at her, his voice small. "They thought I was someone else, Mom. I didn't do anything." "I know," she said softly. "You don't have to explain. But why didn't they believe me?" he asked, the hurt clear in his tone. She looked at him, her heart breaking a little. "Because some people see what they want to see, not what's really there." He turned his face toward the window, watching the lights fade in the distance. "If you hadn't come," he whispered. She reached over and took his hand. "Don't think about that," she said. "What matters is you're safe." They drove in silence for a while. The streets were quiet now, the evening sky painted with the last traces of sunlight. He leaned his head against the window, exhausted while she kept glancing at him to make sure he was okay. Finally, she spoke again, her voice gentle. "You did everything right. You stayed calm, you didn't argue. I'm proud of you for that." He gave a small nod but didn't answer. The weight of what had happened still hung in the air between them. When they reached home, she parked the car and turned to face him fully. "Listen to me," she said, her tone steady but filled with emotion. "What happened today wasn't your fault. You did nothing wrong. Do you understand?" He looked down at his hands. "Yeah," he murmured, though his voice sounded unsure. She reached out, tilting his chin so he'd look at her. "No, I need you to really understand that." He met her eyes then. For the first time, she saw anger mixed with the fear. Not wild anger, quiet, aching anger, the kind that stays with you. "Is it always going to be like this?" he asked softly. She didn't answer right away. She wanted to tell him no, that things would change, that this was just a bad day. But she couldn't bring herself to lie. Instead, she said, "It won't always be fair. But you have to keep your head high anyway. That's how you win even when the world tries to tell you otherwise." He nodded slowly. She could see he was listening, even if his heart wasn't ready to believe it yet. That night after he went to his room, she sat alone at the kitchen table with her laptop open. She typed up everything. The officers' names, badge numbers, time, location, every detail she could remember. It wasn't about revenge. It was about accountability. As she finished the report, her phone buzzed with a message from one of the bystanders who had filmed the scene. The person offered to send her the video if it would help. She replied with a thank you and asked them to keep a copy safe. She leaned back in her chair and took a deep breath. The house was quiet now. She could still hear the faint sound of her son's footsteps upstairs. For a moment she closed her eyes, letting the weight of the day finally settle. She thought about all the years she'd spent training agents to handle dangerous situations. Yet nothing had ever scared her as much as what she saw today. Not because of violence, but because she'd seen her child treated like he was invisible, and she knew that as both a mother and an agent, this fight was far from over. The days after the incident felt strange and heavy. The streets he used to walk without a thought now seemed charged with memory. Every corner, every familiar tree seemed to carry a shadow of what had happened. Even the basketball court where he practiced after school felt different. The rhythm of bouncing the ball against the concrete could no longer drown out the memory of flashing lights and the tense words exchanged with the officers. At home, the quiet seemed louder. He often found himself sitting by the window, staring at the street, thinking about how quickly things had changed. His mother's presence, usually a comforting constant, had shifted into something that was both protective and serious. She had always been strong, but now he saw a fierceness in her that made him feel both safe and unsettled. She spent much of her time at home focused on the report she had filed. Every detail, every timestamp, every officer's response was documented. She wanted it thorough, leaving no room for doubt. She had contacted her colleagues at the bureau to make sure the case was monitored, and that follow-up would happen. For her, this was about more than one night. It was about creating accountability, making sure no other child experienced what her son had. He would sometimes watch her as she worked, noticing the way her fingers moved over the keyboard with precision and focus. Even in the quiet moments, she exuded calm authority. He wondered how she stayed composed while knowing exactly how wrong the situation had been. It was a side of her he rarely saw outside of her work, but now it was part of his reality. One afternoon, the boy's phone buzzed with a notification. It was a message from a teammate who had seen the news coverage. The video of the previous night had gone viral, not in a sensationalized way, but in a way that sparked conversation. People were talking about the incident, questioning how officers handled it and supporting him and his mother. Some wrote words of encouragement. Others offered their own experiences. Reading through the messages, he felt a mixture of embarrassment, relief, and a strange sense of pride. He showed his mother the messages later that day. She leaned over, scanning the screen quietly, her brow furrowed as she read. "People are paying attention," she said softly. "That means there's a chance to make a difference." He nodded, still unsure of how to feel. "It's weird. Part of me just wants to forget it happened, but another part, I don't know. It feels important." "That's because it is," she said gently. "You lived it. And now others can learn from it too. That matters." The following week, the local police department began their internal review in earnest. The officers involved were asked to give detailed statements, and their conduct was examined. The chief held a small meeting, and though the tension was obvious, there was a sense of accountability forming. She attended a few sessions, not to intimidate, but to ensure the truth was clear and that the report she filed was taken seriously. Her son tried to continue his routine, though it was hard. He went to school, attended basketball practice, and did his homework. But now every glance from another adult in a uniform made him pause for a second longer. He realized how vulnerable he had been, how quickly a normal day could turn into something frightening. One afternoon after practice, he and his mother sat on the porch together, the sun dipping low in the sky. He looked thoughtful, quiet for a long time before speaking. "Do you think this will really change anything?" She took a slow breath. "Maybe not everyone will change," she said honestly. "But people notice when someone stands up when the truth is told. Sometimes the smallest actions create ripples that grow into something bigger." He thought about that, the fear he had felt, and the way she had stepped in without panic, without hesitation. "I guess I understand now," he said finally. "I understand why you do what you do at work, and why you stepped in." She reached out and held his hand, squeezing it gently. "I stepped in because I couldn't let you get hurt. And I do what I do at work because I want to protect people, sometimes in ways that aren't as visible. But the lesson for you is just as important. You don't have to be an agent to stand up for yourself and others. Courage comes in many forms. He nodded slowly, letting her words sink in. That evening, he wrote a note in his journal, something he hadn't done in months. He wrote about the fear, the confusion, and the relief of having his mother there. He wrote about the strange mix of pride and sadness he felt watching the video online. And he wrote about a new understanding, that life could be unfair, but standing up, even quietly, could still make a difference. The next few weeks brought follow-ups. The police department issued a public statement acknowledging mistakes and promising additional training for officers on bias and proper procedures. The story appeared in local newspapers, discussed on radio programs, and even sparked conversations in community meetings. Some people were angry, some were supportive, but nearly everyone agreed that the situation highlighted a larger issue. Through it all, she made sure her son remained grounded. She reminded him that the attention wasn't about him. It was about changing the system for others. "You were in the right place at the right time, but not everyone is," she said gently. "That's why it matters that we speak up, that we hold people accountable." Her son started to notice changes in the way people treated him at school. Some classmates looked at him differently, not with suspicion, but with curiosity and admiration. Teachers approached him with quiet respect, and some students asked him questions about what had happened. He didn't answer all of them, but he realized that sharing his experience could help others understand. One evening, they sat together in the living room, reviewing a video clip that one of the neighbors had shared. They watched the moment she arrived, the officers freezing, the fear and relief on his face. He felt his chest tighten as he watched. "I never realized how scared I really looked," he said softly. "You were scared," she said gently. "And that's okay. Courage isn't about not being scared. It's about moving forward despite fear. You did that. I just happened to be there to help." He nodded, a mixture of relief and pride washing over him. The incident was still painful, still frightening, but it no longer felt entirely heavy. It had become a lesson, a story, and a reminder of his mother's quiet strength and his own resilience. Time went on. School, basketball, and daily routines returned. The viral video faded from social media feeds, replaced by other news stories, but the lesson lingered. He found himself paying more attention to how he moved in the world, how he interacted with authority, and how he stood for himself and others. His mother continued her work, but she also focused on family in a new way. She checked in more often, offered advice gently, and shared stories of resilience and courage. At night, they sometimes sat on the porch together, talking about life, fairness, and the world they wanted to see. One afternoon, months after the incident, he brought his basketball to the driveway again. She watched quietly as he dribbled, shot, and practiced, the familiar rhythm soothing him. He paused and looked at her, a small smile on his face. "I feel stronger now," he said. "You are stronger," she replied. "Not because you didn't get scared, but because you learned to keep going. That's real strength." They sat together in silence for a moment, the soft hum of the neighborhood around them. The sun was warm, the air gentle. It was peaceful, but the peace felt earned. They had seen fear, confusion, and injustice, but they had faced it together. At school, conversations about fairness and bias started to take shape. Teachers discussed empathy and awareness in class. Students shared their experiences, listening to one another. The incident became a quiet catalyst for understanding, showing that one moment, one act of standing up, could ripple outward in ways they hadn't expected. For the boy, the lessons stayed with him. He carried a sense of responsibility, of awareness, and a deeper understanding of courage. And for his mother, the experience reinforced the delicate balance between professional duty and parental instinct. She had protected her child, held the system accountable, and reminded him that even in a world that can be unfair, one person's presence, voice, and courage can make a difference. Months later, they looked back on the incident without bitterness, but with clarity. It was a memory of fear and courage, of injustice and protection. It had changed them both, shaped them, and strengthened the bond between them. He realized that life wouldn't always be easy, and the world could be unfair, but he also understood the power of presence, vigilance, and integrity. He had seen fear, but he had also seen courage. And he knew in the quiet moments of life that courage could come quietly, sometimes from unexpected places, sometimes from someone standing beside you. His mother watched him shoot hoops, smile, and laugh again. She felt a quiet pride that went beyond words. She had stepped in, she had protected, she had guided, but most importantly, she had shown him how to carry strength, courage, and resilience into the world. And in the warm light of that evening, with the soft rhythm of the ball on the driveway, they both felt it. A quiet, steady sense that even after fear and chaos, life could return to peace, and people could still choose to do what was right.